Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here today. We have two major announcements this week tied to this conference. And as a longtime sponsor and partner of ARM, we thought it was appropriate to make those announcements here. A bit of background, CTI is a 23-year-old firm. It has a global presence with a very, very high emphasis on regenerative medicine. The company has 6 business units, which frankly will allow cell and gene therapy research to progress all the way from preclinical to commercial stage. It has a footprint that encompasses 6 continents and has associates on more than 65 countries. Over the course of the company's 23-year history, we have had relatively consistent 15 to 20% annual growth, primarily through organic methodologies with occasional acquisitions. The hallmark of the company from beginning has been research around complex and critically ill patient populations. To give you a sense, about 80% of all historical and contemporary work is in the field of rare disease. And right now, over the last 3 to 5 years, 50% of all projects involve cell or gene therapy, not surprisingly with a heavy emphasis around immuno-oncology and also around pediatrics. We are one of the 20 largest clinical research organizations in the world. In fact, we believe we're about the 15th largest, and there are more than 1,000 clinical research organizations currently functioning globally. We are the oldest, largest privately owned clinical research organization where the founders are still active in day-to-day activities. And over our 3 decades since inception, we have been part of more than 10,000 successful projects, and we currently work on behalf of more than 250 pharmaceutical, biotechnology, medical device companies, ranging from the largest in the world to emerging companies. One of the things we're quite proud of is we've been part of more than 150 drug approvals across both FDA, EMA, PMDA in Japan, and other regulatory bodies. And I'll share with you a slide in just a moment showing the high presence of CTI research across both the previously approved cell and gene products as well as ones that are in the pipeline for regulatory milestones this year and next. One of the things that we feel separates us in the service industry is an extremely high employee retention rate, which exceeds 90% and has for the last decade or more. The global footprint is really important because it allows us to take an early stage proof of concept cell or gene therapy program, and if this successfully demonstrates proof of concept, we can move this and expand it globally. Many of our late phase 2 or phase 3 clinical programs now encompass not just multiple countries, but multiple continents. And obviously one has to consider, especially many of the infrastructure challenges with doing regenerative medicine or advanced therapy work across multiple geographies. But we have been able to successfully do this just about everywhere across the world. A couple of hallmarks recently as we treated the first gene therapy research subject in Saudi Arabia last year, and also now have more than a half a dozen active programs within Visa, which is the regulatory body in Brazil. I believe we brought the first advanced therapy product to Brazil in the last 5 years or so. This is particularly important when you think about rare diseases where we have to go where the patients are, where the key opinion leaders are, and where the research sites are. And it's really quite different from how we did advanced therapy research 10 years ago, where we moved the patients to the research centers, primarily in Europe and North America. We're now able to do this across the globe. As mentioned, we have 6 business units, and just to highlight those for just a moment, typically for us as we get engaged about 3 years or so before the first patient is treated, we have a global regulatory development strategy team which has experience with all the typical regulatory designations, including orphan drug, breakthrough designation, RMAT designation, et cetera. We're able to engage on behalf of the sponsors and use the background information and precedents that we've been part of over the last several years on behalf of any company who might be new into the clinic in the advanced therapy space. This same particular group stays with the pharma or biotech company throughout the product development. So in fact, we've got continuity going from preclinical into early stage trials, into late approval trials, and then finally post-commercialization. One of our most recent announcements, which I'll expand on in just a moment or two, is around our ability to provide in the future contract manufacturing around cell and gene therapy, and we feel like that was a missing part, especially for many of the emerging companies who desperately need to find capacity in a timely fashion. Our clinical operations, as alluded to earlier, are global and are full service, allowing us basically to run the smallest or the largest clinical research program in all aspects of it. And this is a group that has been part of, as mentioned, more than 150 approvals globally. We have our own research site in the United States, so we actually can be a site and frequently do that in the case of some early research work. And then we have found over the last several years the need to actually have our own laboratory services, and these are primarily bioanalytical services that also include biorepository and really all aspects of laboratory services to support regenerative medicine. So including contract manufacturing laboratory support, things like sterility, potency, lot release specifications, as well as assay development and validation according to GLP standards. And then finally, the group that we call our real world or late phase group has become increasingly more important with regard to pricing and reimbursement and health technology assessments. As mentioned, on the global laboratory side, our footprint right now includes North America and Europe. Right here in Spain, we have our European laboratory. This actually shows the laboratory in North America. We are able to provide a full service of laboratory services to support all regenerative medicine type programs from late preclinical all the way through the commercial stage. One of the announcements that I'm happy to share actually is tomorrow in Bilbao, Spain, we will be signing a memo of understanding with the Basque government relative to a very, very large lab expansion there. And this will allow us to support regenerative medicine studies across Europe as well as the Middle East and Africa regions. We will increase the size of our footprint more than five-fold over the coming next 12 months, and actually will add up to 100 new positions over the coming years. So it will become a central hub of laboratory testing in the advanced therapy space. Just to highlight, as mentioned, we have more than 50 active cell and gene therapy programs that CTI is actively managing. These range from early stage proof of concept studies through very large 1,000 patient plus registration studies. We're very happy to say that when we start working with a company, and some of our earliest sponsors that we've worked with, like Spark Therapeutics, Bluebird Bio, we're able to actually start with them almost a decade ago, move through all of the regulatory and clinical stages now to the commercial stages, and we continue to follow those patients from the early regulatory studies and have registries that are active globally to make sure that we can assess long-term safety in these particular patient populations. So it's basically a model that allows us to accumulate long-term safety data on these patients, which are of great interest, obviously, to regulatory authorities. I mentioned this earlier, but the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine has their annual report, and this particular slide actually is a synthesis of one of their slides, basically showing primarily EMA, FDA, and PMDA milestones expected in 2022 and 2023. And I'm happy to show you that the ones that are highlighted actually are ones that CTI has been part of in many cases for many years. We don't know if all of these will receive approvals this year, or in some cases if additional data is going to be required. But historically, if you look at the dozen or so products that already have FDA or EMA approval, we have been part of more than half of those, and we feel that over the next couple of years we'll be in a likely position, whether it be our regulatory group, our manufacturing group, our laboratory group, our real-world evidence group, or our clinical research organization to be part of these programs. Our model is unique. There are people that are outstanding at manufacturing. There are people that are outstanding at clinical research and regulatory. We feel like there are a very limited number of companies that are actually able to traverse the entire landscape, and we feel like we're particularly uniquely suited in that the vast majority of our experience is in advanced therapies. And having an experienced team and having a team that basically can take a project from its inception all the way through to approval, however long or however deep that project is very, very unique. The breadth of our cell and gene experience, just to give you a sense, you can see on this slide, not to get into all the details, but quite experienced across virtually all cell sources, also quite experienced across virtually all viral vectors, and also route of administration. More and more of these products are not administered purely intravenously, but have unique routes of administration to try and maximize efficacy and minimize toxicity. And you can see in the lower right-hand quadrant of this slide the experience levels, things like intraocular, intrathecal, obviously being able to assess the best route of administration. To give you an idea, right now our clinical program, and this represents, like I said, about 50 active sponsors that we're working with, but if you look at it, you'll see about half of the programs are cell therapy programs and about half are gene therapy programs. Of the cell therapy programs, about half are autologous and about half are allogeneic. This data actually mimics quite closely I think ARM's data that they capture and produce annually. The far left-hand side of the slide, you can see the phases of study, and not surprisingly, CTI, like the industry, has a preponderance of early phase 1, phase 2, or combined phase 1, 2 programs. But happy to say that of the 50 programs we are currently involved with, about 10 or 12 have actually moved into late phase pivotal registration studies, and we're cautiously optimistic that, as was on one of the earlier slides, you will see a number of these be submitted for applications for approval in the coming months or a year or two. Also wanted to just mention, if you look at the viral vector, not surprisingly, the two most common viral vectors that we're used to working in are adenovirus and lentivirus, although we're seeing an increasing amount of retrovirus. And certainly from a experience standpoint, as the previous speaker highlighted, we want to be in a position, whether it's our own manufacturing, our regulatory, or our clinical operations, to accommodate any changes in viral vector that may occur in the coming years. The last point I just wanted to mention was an announcement that we made at the meeting on the Mesa in October, which was a joint venture formed between Cincinnati Children's Hospital and CTI around contract manufacturing. We happen to share a geographic proximity, but at the same time, we share a long history of regenerative medicine. And we announced a joint venture in October. I'm happy to say that this week we actually announced the first managing director of this joint venture is Dr. Robert Preddy, whose name might be familiar to a number of you in the audience. Dr. Preddy actually was the chairman of ARM for a number of years and was very actively involved. He's formerly the CEO of Minaris, Hitachi, and PCT Therapeutics. So he brings a breadth of experience to our joint venture. We also announced earlier this week that the name of our new joint venture is Current Biologics, C-U-R-R-E-N-T, and that's obvious a play on the contemporary theme of the advanced therapies, as well as the fact that the proximity to the river where the manufacturing facility is being constructed. This joint venture, we believe, brings the best of two organizations together. We are actually the operating partner. CTI is the majority owner, but we're able to take the 15-year manufacturing history of Cincinnati Children's, as well as their personnel, their current client base, and some of their processes, and move those into the joint venture. And so we're moving quite quickly on that, and we'll continue to share with the group announcements. So the CTI research cell and gene story, we feel, is quite strong. It's more than a decade as a leading clinical research organization, which has experience across almost a dozen approved or currently under review products. We have an experienced regulatory team who has partnered on a number of these approved products. We have a growing global lab footprint to support the advanced therapy research specifically. And we have a new cell and gene manufacturing venture, which we think is particularly important for emerging companies. These emerging companies we know are struggling sometimes to get the priority that they need from a manufacturing perspective. And we feel like this is particularly important in the early proof of concept stage studies. So we look forward to sharing more of the CTI story with this group at coming meetings. So thank you very much.